Hello, I'm Brandon Martini, a commercial pilot and flight instructor.
And I'm Carson Vasquez. I'm a private pilot.
And you're listening to the Aviation Mentors Podcast, sponsored by Stratus Financial.
So buckle up, because the Aviation Mentors are taking off.
We live in Southern California, where we have, supposedly we have seasons like winter, spring, summer, and fall, but we also have a more prominent season, which is fire season, or earthquake season, actually. But fire season is the topic today. So we have pretty much fire season year round. Today we have an awesome guest and a good friend of mine, Ryan Elssmann. How you doing today, Ryan?
Doing well. Happy to be here.
Thanks so much for coming down. So Ryan is a air attack pilot. He actually flies a turbine Twin Commander 690, and he's basically the ATC pilot for a fire TFR. So the plane that kind of controls all the other airplanes in the area, that flies over and above all the other airplanes and the fire. So he's got a pretty cool job today, and we're really lucky we get to talk to him. I know there's a lot of people that listen that would love to be an aerial firefighter or something along those lines.
Yeah, and thank you so much for being on today, Ryan. It's really good to see you again. It's been a little bit. And I think that aerial firefighting is really one of the coolest jobs in aviation. I know plenty of students I've talked to that have gotten into it solely to go and do that. And personally, I think my closest encounter with fire was a little bit of smoke that was flying outside of a TFR. It was a big fire in Lake Elsinore, and when I got home, my mom said, "Carson Vasquez, have you started smoking?" I smelled like smoke, so I can't imagine what you guys smell like after that. But let's start off with what your job title is and what it really entails.
My job title is an air attack pilot. So pretty much I'm pilot in command of 690, and there's a person sitting on the right seat. His title is called a ATGS, or the Air Tactical Ground Supervisor. And he is essentially in charge of controlling the fire traffic area, or the FTA. So you see those TFRs for the fires. We fly into those, or it could be one that the fire just started. And he's in charge of managing that airspace, keeping all of the firefighting helicopters and airplanes separated, making sure they're not dropping water or retardant on the ground crews, monitoring lots of different radios and essentially controlling that fire traffic area.
That's really neat. Do you ever have to talk on those radios and talk to any of the other pilots as well? Or does that other guy or lady just talk to them usually?
Majority of the time they're talking to everyone. If it gets too, busy or overworked, I can help him out with the radios. A lot of times we can talk ahead of time. A lot of these fires, especially in Southern California, will get a lot of media helicopters. We'll decide ahead of time what altitude we want them at, and I'll take the media and tell them, usually 2,000 feet above us or whatever we decide to do. And then, if we're in a busy, congested area, like I've done a couple of fires down next to Burbank, I'll talk to ATC and let them know what's going on, give them the updates on the fire, making sure that if there's any other traffic coming in and out, there's approaches or anything, they're letting me know where that traffic is, so that we can kind of all work together and make it not have any issues.
That's really neat. I know I've flown pretty close to those fire TFRs like several times, and I can see the planes, and I've seen the air attack pilot for the fires that I've flown around. Who knows? I might have even seen you possibly over like North LA. I've flown over several near Castaic and things like that. And those are just amazing pilots that just try to keep all of our homes safe. So we really appreciate people like you that go in and talk to everybody on the ground and make sure everyone's on the ground is safe, and it's really respectful. So I know that I've flown over a lot of fires, and I've seen a lot of fires, especially living in California my whole life. Like I said, we have fire season year round pretty much around here, which is pretty crazy. But I know that Carson has had kind of an in-person view of a fire as of semi-recently. So Carson, what was that like? And tell us a little about that and some of the planes that might have flown over your home.
Yeah, well, during fire season, I've also seen hundreds of fires, and the planes that flew over my house, actually during the Holy Fire back in 2018, that was actually really crazy. We got evacuated from my house, and we had to go to my uncle's in Riverside, and it was just a crazy experience to watch. These planes just flew straight pretty much into and over the huge plume of smoke that was coming, less than a mile or two from my house. And it looks like they all fly in a really tall stack going over this TFR. So can you explain to us a little bit about what the types of aircraft that flew over the fire are and what their role is?
Sure. Yeah. So it depends on the kind of fire, what resources make the most sense. But, you got your helicopters, and there's many different types. It's, type 1 will be like the heavy helicopters. You'll see the big Chinooks or the sky cranes, and then down from there is type 2, and type 3 will be a little bit smaller depending on what they need. And then as far as the fixed wing side of stuff, you've got the seats, it stands for single engine air tanker. Those are really great for smaller fire just broke out. They're pretty maneuverable if it's a hard to reach area. They're a little bit more maneuverable than some. From there, a little bit bigger tankers. You got all the, CAL FIRE S2s, LATs, which is large air tanker, and there's many different varieties of those, and then the VLATs, which is a very large air tanker, and I think right now it's just the DC-10 that would be the very large air tanker. You got, like the super scoopers or the fire bosses that will scoop water, so if it's right next to a lake, they can every couple minutes be dropping a load of water on the fire. So it really just depends on what the fire is doing, what the fire behavior is doing, and the person next to me has many years in the fire world, so they can typically see where the fire is going to go and what resource to utilize in that moment.
Yeah, it was crazy during that week-long fire that we watched. There was just, the super tankers that were flying over and over. The DC-10s were doing pickups, and there was like 2 helicopters that they had. There was a blue and a yellow one, and those are the ones that really saved our little village we got back there. They just had them keep going, and they emptied out Corona Lake and Lake Elsinore just over the course of that week. It was phenomenal to watch them.
Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah, they can do, especially if there's water really close, even it seems like once a minute they're dropping, 1,000+ gallons of water. And so sometimes, people like the planes, and then sometimes the helicopters really can help out a lot.
Yeah, those are some really neat airplanes that have flown over, and helicopters that have flown over these fires. Personally, my favorite airplane, everyone knows how I like my Icon A5, but unfortunately that doesn't help out with firefighting. I would really love, my dream airplane. Actually, I have a lot of dream airplanes, to be completely honest. I got to fly that Albatross recently, which was really a dream. But if I was ever going to go do aerial firefighting or something, I would love to fly a CL-415. Or the Martin Mars. I mean, the Martin Mars would be like a dream come true. But that CL-415, I mean, I feel like that's within grasp of something that would be possible. I'm already multi-engine seaplane pilot. Why can't I just go fly that, right? I should just go get the type rating. Let's go do it. So, Ryan, you want to go with me and get the type rating?
Yeah, let's do it.
That'd be a blast. So, Ryan, we've talked about planes that we would love to go fly together or get type ratings for, and some of the planes that fly over the fires, but I really want to know about the plane that you in particular fly. What type of plane, what type of engines, and how do you particularly communicate with other people below you? I know that you talked about your kind of co-pilot or person in the aircraft that flies with you. They handle a lot of the radios, but do you handle any of them at any time? And tell us about that airplane.
Sure, yeah. So it's a Commander 690. We've got, A model, we've got the B model. They're pretty much are very similar. The reason that they like this plane is it's a turbine airplane, so it's really quick. So if you get a call, you can almost do 300 knots in it, but then when you're over the fire, you can bring it back to, 120 knots, somewhere in that range. They're Garrett engines, which, if anyone's ever heard them, they're very noisy on the ground, but they're very responsive. They're a little bit different than the PT6, like King Air would have. But yeah, it's a super fun plane to fly, very rewarding, and it definitely can be a handful, especially transitioning into it. But yeah, I really enjoy flying it. And then
yeah, so I've flown a couple twin commanders as well, but none with turbine engines. Have you ever flown any twin commanders that do not have the turbine engines? And what was it like transitioning from a plane like a Duchess, which I know you've got hundreds and hundreds of hours on, to a aircraft that's a little bigger and has a ton more power? How was that? And what was that training like?
So I've never actually flown any of the commanders that are the piston versions, but going from the Duchess to the Commander was a big jump up for sure. It's the biggest thing I would say is just the amount of power is definitely noticeable, but having reverse thrust is pretty cool. It's coming into land is it's a pretty exciting thing that, when you come in and you land, it feels like you don't even need the brakes. It feels like you're throwing out a little parachute when you go into reverse. So that was probably the most exciting thing. But I think the thing that most people will always hear about Commanders is taxiing it. It's a very different plane to taxi. You don't push the rudder pedals down like you normally do on really any other plane. you just use about the first inch of travel on the pedal, and that controls a hydraulic nose wheel steering. So that's the biggest thing. People are like, well, what is this? It's like a very weird transition. But once you get that down, then it's all fun and games after that.
Yeah, I've flown the Twin Commander several times. I've ferried it over from a few different airports, and I've flown a few different ones. And yes, taxiing that thing is the craziest airplane I've ever taxied ever. Just when you press that rudder pedal and it moves and it doesn't stop, and then it's like you're fighting it the whole time, especially the first time you go take off with it.
Yeah.
I took off from like a 40-foot like wide runway the first time, and that didn't feel sketchy at all. So I've known you, Ryan, for several years now. I've flown with you. I did some actually multi-engine training with you when I was still working on my multi several years ago, and you were just a flight instructor. So I've got to see you kind of grow in your aviation career, and I think you've probably got to see me as well. And I'm kind of curious, is this a stepping stone for you? Is this a final place where you want to be in your aviation career? Because as we know, there's a lot of pilots out there that like stepping stones, and they also know where they want to get to in their career. Is this where you want to go? Is there somewhere else you want to get to at some point in your career? What are your goals and what are your dreams and what are your aspirations? And want to know when you hit them and what you want to do.
So yeah, it's been an awesome journey. I guess it was 2018 when I first started working back at Next Gen. So it's crazy to think how many years have passed since then. I think this has been an awesome experience. I have really grown to love love what I do. This has always been the environment that I wanted to get into. One of my first chief pilot when I started at taking flying lessons I went to Walla Walla University. He did flying stuff, and he actually flew a Commander as well. And then I heard that story, and then he just talked about all the different flying world, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I'm very happy where I'm at. I love the company I work for. They're great to work for. So I'm happy where I'm at, but I think the long-term goal would be to get into the tanker world. I always, growing up, I always saw the tankers flying, especially close to my house and everywhere here. And that just looked awesome, flying low to the ground and being able to help out fires, or help out all the homes like that. So that's been the long-term goal, but for now I'm happy where I'm at. So we'll see where it takes me from here.
What is the dream tanker? I just told you mine would be that Martin Mars for sure. What is your dream tanker that you'd go fly?
I think the dream tanker would be flying the DC-10. I've seen them. I didn't get to see them at all last year I was working, but this year I've seen them work, and it's amazing to see when they're doing their runs. I think it's close to 10,000 gallons. It just seems like they can put down about a mile of retardant. And I got to get the tour of that plane this year and meet some of the pilots and the chief pilot this year. And they seem like an awesome company to work for. I think that's going to be the ultimate goal, is the DC-10.
So how many hours do you currently have, and how many do you think you need in the aerial attack pilot position to eventually fly something like that DC-10? Like, what's it going to take, and how many years of experience for you to go do that and realize your goal?
So I think I'm just about over 2,800 hours. And just at that like 500 hours of turbine area, somewhere in there. I think I've heard different answers on that, 3,000, 3,500, it really depends what website you go to or whatever. I think it's more of just kind of showing your interest in it and being able to, I've heard the biggest thing is just being able to be on the road with the same crew for 2 weeks, and can you guys get along, and, making those right connections. So I think in the next, I would hope in the next year or two, I've made the right connections and had enough experience to get myself into one of those positions.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about making connections in this industry several times on the podcast. And I think making connections is probably the most important thing you can do in this industry. When we were talking to Chris Cirillo in an episode a couple weeks ago, I think, he told us, you just go walk around the airport and go talk to people and make connections and do all of that. I mean, just yesterday I was in an Uber from one airport to another, and the Uber driver heard me and another pilot talking, and he said, "Oh, where are you going to go get that engine rebuilt at?" or something. We were talking about an engine rebuilt. And he said, "Oh, I used to own the the engine shop at Corona Airport. And I said, what? You used to own the engine shop at Corona Airport? He said, oh yeah, I retired 15 years ago and now I do Uber and Lyft for fun. I said, well, that's pretty crazy. So he was telling us about all the airplanes he flies. And I got his number. Maybe we'll put him on the podcast one day because he was an interesting guy for sure. So it would be pretty fantastic. He ended up coming out and going to Corona Airport. He knew exactly where we were going to go meet this other mechanic over there. And he ended up getting out of the car without ending our Uber ride and going to go say hello to his friend. So just the power of connections is really big. So I really can see where you're talking about with connections and needing to make them. And in the aerial firefighting industry, it's really necessary, obviously, because it's a small industry.
Yeah, I just had a quick story about connections. Back in 2020 was when I was going to start SkyWest, and obviously that got shut down. And I kept instructing. I was over at San Bernardino. We just stopped by over at Millionaire, and I saw one of the pilots that works for this company out there next to one of our planes, and I'd never seen him before, but I was like, oh, that's cool. What kind of plane is that? What do you do? And he said, oh, I'm an air tech pilot. And I was like, well, that's really cool. That's actually what I want to do. So how do I get into that? And he's like, oh, well, the boss is right over there. He was flying. He had a 340. He was just happened to stop by. So went over and said, hey, I'd like to work for you someday. And, I think he kind of took a chance on me. He's like, didn't know me, but we kind of stayed in contact and told him what I was doing. And took a chance. So I was super grateful that it all worked out the way it did. And yeah, I've loved every minute of it. So
meeting the right people at the right time. I don't think there's anything except for fate, because you're going to go meet the right people and you're going to meet them at the right time whenever you want to do it. So you probably thought about air attack firefighting, and there's a book called The Secret. It's about manifesting everything in your life. All you got to do is talk about it. All you got to do is dream it. All you got to do is believe it. And it will come true. I promise you. There's been a million things that I've said I wanted to do, and I've made them come true. And it sounds like you have. And I know Carson's done that several times as well.
Yeah, that's actually a crazy coincidence. I was just at Luxair at San Bernardino. I met some of the fire guys there in the FBO. So that's pretty funny. Anyway, Ryan, thank you so much for being on with us today. I've really always had so many questions about what the firefighters actually do. And aerial firefighting is really an incredible field and a great dream for many pilots that are, in training or looking for jobs after they get their commercial. And it has a special place in my heart, especially after it saved my house a couple years ago. And it's really awesome to hear about your aviation journey, see where you've gone since I met you as a CFI, and see where you're going with it.
Yeah, if you'd like to reach out to any of us, actually, you could reach out via Twitter or Instagram. For me, at Mr. Martini Guy. For Carson, it's at Carson_AV17. And if you'd like to connect with Ryan, he's got a great Instagram, and it's Ryan_Elssmann, RYAN_ELSSMANN.
As a wrap up for the day, remember, we're here to guide you in your aviation journey. So fly safe and enjoy the ride.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.